Now let us praise John Derbyshire. He used to write for the National Review, and long before Colin ever popped on the scene, while Colin was out in Southern California playing golf twice a week with my rich friends, John Derbyshire was doing some of the heavy lifting and exposing the denial, deceit, and delusion surrounding this level of black criminality and how reporters and public officials just absolutely cannot look it in the eye and tell us what's going on about it. We're going to look at one of the column about this whole phenomenon that got John fired from the National Review, where I used to follow his writing quite religiously. That was when the National Review was just on the downslope of the Buckley era. That was when the National Review was something more than a play toy for trust fund kids with more money than common sense. So Derbyshire wrote a column called The Talk. Again, we're going to see it in a minute, but his version of The Talk was he'd been watching television and seeing the news stories. There was a whole bunch of stories all at once about how black parents are giving their children the talk. About how white people are always messing with black people for no reason whatsoever. About how black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. About how cops are always picking on black people. They're always arresting them. They're testifying against them. Then the prosecutors get in on it. Then the judges get in on it. Then the parole boards get in on it. Then when the black people go back on the streets, the cops, it starts all over again. They go back to prison again, all the time ignoring the crap white people do. And so that means as a kid, you have to be 10 times better than a white person or else you're going to go to prison and not have a job. Capiche? You know, one of the things you learn from being a parent is you could sit, or any teacher knows this, you could say one thing, but people are learning something entirely different. So when people get this talk, and we're going to see a video on The Talk in a minute, when you get a video, when you get a talk from your parents telling you in detail about white racism, how it's been going on for a long time, and how black people don't have a chance, so why should we even try? You think you're teaching your kid one thing, that they have to work harder to overcome this. What you're really teaching them is racial resentment on an epic level, and what you're really teaching them is black people don't have a chance, don't try, just whatever you get a chance, take out some hostility on white people, whatever form it takes, because they deserve it. That's the talk. That's what these kids are learning from this ridiculous piece of video just filed the other night on ABC News, filmed in location of all places, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
In recent times, it has been an unrelenting stream of stories.
Growing outrage over the deadly police shootings of 2 black men.
Police officer charged with opening fire and killing an unarmed former college football player.
Cell phone video seen around the world.
Black men, often unarmed, shot dead by police. It has drawn renewed attention to what has long been called the talk.
Here's an opportunity for you to engage, ask questions, ask the uncomfortable questions.
The need for a meaningful national discussion has inspired workshops like this one run by Noble, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement.
I'm concerned about the person losing their life because a cop said, I was afraid.
The goal? To have that conversation by allowing families to talk directly to law enforcement.
This can't be the norm. We have some major issues that are not being touched right now.
It's a centuries-old conversation, how one must navigate an often complicated color-conscious nation when you are black. Complicated, but sometimes funny, like tonight on ABC's Blackish.
Now, my mom would have the talk with me all the time.
America hates you.
For 19-year-old Winston Harris, this is more than a TV episode. It is his life. He watched horrified as this Facebook Live video of Philando Castile being shot and killed by a Minnesota police officer.
Please don't tell me this, Lord. Please, Jesus, don't tell me that he's gone.
In Philando's face, Winston sees his own.
As each shot rang out, I could feel it. Not like actually, but like I could feel it. Like each time, like bang, 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 like I could just feel it.
Crosstown, his feelings echoed by another teenager, 16-year-old Iche Fersner.
It hurts because my life just seems like it's nothing, and
the United States.
Turning to the modern teenager's diary, Facebook, Iche penned a grief-stricken post.
We can't even go outside without having to be scared for our lives.
Both live in middle-class neighborhoods, the American dream palpable, tempered by this fact. Their sons still live in a country where too often they will be judged by the color of their skin and not the content of their character.
What do I think of when raising a black child in America? At times, it could be frightening.
Like so many other black parents, Pat's made an effort to shield her son, private, diverse schools. But her best efforts don't make her son immune to reality.
Honestly, I'm a little scared. You know, it is unsettling.
Unsettling for Iche as well.
I am only 15 years old, and I fear that I'm possibly going to die before I even turn 18.
What do you think of some of the unique burdens of being a parent to a black child, particularly a black boy,
Safety. Like, I always have to worry about his safety. I believe he's prejudged before people actually get to know him, because that's just how it's been programmed in society.
Well, I know there's this view that somehow that this is just a kind of paranoia.
But clinician Dr. Kenneth Hardy says it's not some made-up idea.
The pain and suffering of African Americans historically have not really engendered broad, sweeping empathy, because I think that what racism has done is that it has stripped African American people from being beings to being things.
He says it's actual trauma, particularly stemming from the lives lost, captured on video. Philando Castile, a 32-year-old in Minnesota,
Stay with me.
killed while in the car with his girlfriend and daughter. There was Alton Sterling, Tamir Rice, but also too many others, faces who may not have made the news. In these cases, many of the officers who killed them went free without a conviction.
It's just like, well, I mean, who's next?
Iche's father, Michael, knows there's but so much he can control.
You're powerless. You feel like you cannot do anything about it.
For Iche to feel like his life isn't valued, that's your fault, America. That's your fault. It pisses me off.
Conversations many black families believe they must have that others don't, something she recalls discussing with a coworker.
The topic of, do you teach your kids how to talk to cops? The other manager, who was white, said, no, why would I have to talk to my kids about that? And I was like, exactly, why should I have to talk to my sons about that? The double standard in the United States sickens me. It really does.
Well, I wish that you knew how it felt to feel like your child is an endangered species, literally.
Mike isn't alone.
Noble has been inundated with a number of requests for this program.
Both the Young family and the Harrises heard about the one event happening in Philly, a workshop hosted by black police officers.
We've done it somewhere in the thousands, I believe, somewhere around 2,000 times, just within the last few years.
Can we do a scenario, please?
Law enforcement attempting to tackle these questions through interactive demonstrations. They set up a routine traffic stop.
Ma'am, can you roll down your window?
You don't have to talk to him.
Excuse me, sir, I'm talking to the driver.
But for many, the scenario felt sterile, not touching on the issues they came to debate.
That was a great little scenario, but I'm not concerned about my kids being stopped. I'm concerned about the person losing their life because a cop said, I was afraid. If someone can drive away without losing their lives, that's a good thing. That can't be the narrative. This can't be the norm. We have some major issues that are not being touched right now.
You talking about issues that I look just like you. I'm a mother. I've been a police officer for 27 years. If you want something to be changed, then be a part of it.
You said even people who carry the badge, when they get pulled over, you get nervous. That's not an individual issue, and that's a systemic issue. This is embroiling black communities all over the country.
There's still so much left unsaid, but the workshop perhaps a small step towards understanding.
I don't want to be one of this and then not do anything. I don't like people that do that. So if I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to be about it.
You know, I just gained more understanding of, being a cop.
Just one of the lessons Winston is taking with him in his new chapter as a freshman at Temple University.
I remember when I was his age and going off to college, my mom and I would have lots of conversations about staying alive.
Going through high school and middle school, never had that conversation with him. It's not until he entered college and hearing all the reports, knowing the type of environment he was coming into, which he wasn't used to. He's just not like a street person. So the conversation shifted, preparing him to come to college.
Worried that a cop might look past his boyish face and see not his promise, but him as a problem.
I don't think it's what you're wearing on the outside. If they just look wrong, you know, they'll stop them. Why do you have to even stop them to ask them a question like, where are you going?
You ever been stopped by the police?
Never. I hope I never get stopped either.
Still, Winston eager to step out on his own and be a man.
You dating yet on campus?
No.
No? Okay.
No. I used to tell him I'm your girlfriend till you're 35.
Right? I know that's right.
While back in North Philly, Iche just wants the opportunity to be a kid.
I should be thinking about if I'm going to go to this party. I shouldn't be thinking about if a cop can shoot me in the head.
When I was your age, I thought a lot about dying, you know, as a young black man, and was obsessed by that notion.
I try to stay positive, but what's going to happen tomorrow?
The questions and the burdens of men far older than him.
I want to stay alive so that I can be here for them.
This is not a new conversation in America, but rarely in our rich and sometimes rocky history has it felt more urgent. For Nightline, I'm Byron Pitts in Philadelphia.
If you want to see a video of what this talk, it's over at myminds.com channel. And then I think the video actually helps in this case because we could see a picture of the kids and the family, and we could see the crocodile tears coming from the family when they talk about how they're worried about their 15-year-old kid is going to be killed by the police officers. Okay, listen, we don't even need John Derbyshire or Heather McDonald and her book War on Cops and all of her other great writings to tell us what we already know. When a black person walks out of their house in Philadelphia, their greatest chances of getting killed are not by a white cop, not by a white guy like Colin, not by an Amish or an Eskimo or a kitty, puppy, or turtle. When you walk out of that house in Philly, if you're a 15-year-old child, you send your kid out the door, the biggest chances by 100 times of him getting killed are by another one of the fellas. You got that? You didn't mention that in your talk, did you? That's because your life is so full of racial venom and hatred, you can't even see straight for this enormous amount of racial hatred you have for white people that you disguise with your little dashiki. You disguise with your earnest tone. You disguise with a little bit of anger for your child when you don't give a damn about your kid. You just care about trashing white people because that's what a loser you are. Talking about the parents, really talking about the reporter in this case. I don't have much hope for the kids, to tell you the truth. These kids look like they're on a treadmill that they're just on and they're never going to get off. Where they learn racial hostility in high school, they become experts at it in college, and that's their life. Going around looking for little racial grudges every single damn moment of their life. What did Hamlet say? The 1,000 cuts that flesh is heir to, or something like that. I don't remember the exact quote. Man, everybody walks around. Everybody walks around every day suffering little indignities. It's part of living on this planet. And how we handle them is part of how we grow up to be an adult, to be human. But blaming it on other people like these clowns, blaming it on white people, on white cops, and let's not have any mistake, cops are a proxy for hatred, black on white racial hatred. Don't mistake that for 1 second. I mean, to sit there and blame other people for your life, that's the definition of juvenile. That's the definition of adolescent. That's the definition of infantile. We used to do a lot of interviews here, and he makes a lot of appearances in my books with former prison psychologist Marlon Newbern. Marlon Newbern used to talk about how so many people who are dependent on welfare for a long time, they are infantilized. Because they never take that step from getting off the government tit. They never take that step of taking responsibility for their own life. That's why crime is so easy. It's easy to stick a gun in somebody's face if you think it's not really your fault that you have to do it. You know, criminals aren't that much different than you and I. When you and I do something, we want a reason. I mean, we want to cut the grass. We want a reason. We don't want to make our yard look nice. Maybe we don't want our neighbors getting angry with us. You stick a gun in somebody's face. Is it because you want the money? Not really. There's a little bit of that going on. But when you stick a gun in somebody's face, or you shoot somebody, you put a knife into somebody, there's a lot of anger there. There's a lot of resentment. There's a lot of rage, black on white, because somehow you think white people deserve it for keeping the brothers down for 4 million, 4 billion years. That's what we just heard from that clown of a reporter in Philadelphia. So you're doing a story on black victimization in Philadelphia, white on black victimization in Philadelphia. Are you serious? When a white person walks out of their house in Philadelphia, who are they at risk of getting killed by? Who are they at risk of getting robbed, murdered, harassed, taunted, beaten? Who? Another white guy? That's what the great philosopher, NFL player Shannon Sharp says. That's what the great philosopher, Professor Eric Dyson says. Oh, it's all white on white, black on black, Colin. Don't you know that? You walk out the door in Philadelphia, if you get robbed, it's going to be a black person. Those are the numbers. Those are the real world. Every single damn person in Philadelphia knows that. Capiche? Everybody in Philadelphia knows where the no-go zones are. Everybody that goes to that school we just heard about called Temple, they know that when you're at Temple, by the way, Temple has the largest private police force of any college in the world. Not even close to being the biggest college in the world. But when you're in Temple in North Philadelphia, you are on an island. Even the island isn't that safe. But when you step 10 feet off the island, you're in with the sharks. Many, many hundreds of Temple students have found that out over the years. Now Temple's talking about buying some property, building a stadium, replacing some of the homes, buying some of the homes, putting students in some of the homes. And it's amazing when you see the stories on these, on their local reaction to what Temple wants to do in the neighborhood. They're not really trying to hide anything. We don't like what you're doing, Temple. We don't want any more white people in our neighborhood. We don't want you gentrifying our neighborhood. Nobody's hiding that. The ironic thing, of course, is that Temple, where they made this video, this is like the world center of critical race theory. Black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. We're going to see a story in a minute where that's an actual thing. This is what people are learning in high school and college. And now we got the parents turning around and just giving their kids some lessons in critical race theory. They think they're helping their children. What they're really doing is putting a lot of other people at risk with this racial hostility, black on white. I mean, how many examples of that do you want in Philadelphia? Raw, black on white violence. I'm not even thinking of 200 black people in North Philadelphia rampaging through the Temple campus, beating up white kids, white girls, putting 6 in the hospital. That happened last year. People, when they make comments to the Philadelphia Inquirer, ran a story on it. They tried to avoid running a story on it. Couldn't help it after a while. They made comments. They going, hey, what's up with all those black kids beating up all those white kids? And doesn't that happen a lot at Temple? Isn't that a thing at Temple? White kids are targets of people who live in that neighborhood. Isn't that a thing? So Janice Armstrong, the black columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer / Daily News, they're now one paper. There used to be 2 thriving papers. Now they're 1. Both papers were down with the cause. Both papers were just doing these, just every one of their stories is inflicted with this liberal worldview. That black people are not responsible for themselves. Good high taxes are good. Low taxes are bad. Trump is bad. So both of these papers ran themselves off the cliff, and then they got together to save money, and then the geniuses got into a room and they said, okay, we really had a lot of bad luck here the last couple of years because our circulation's down, advertising's down, we're losing money, we're just about ready to shut the door unless we can find another rich philanthropist to come in and save us. Anybody have any ideas what we should do now with our editorial product? Every first guy raises his hand and says, oh yeah, we should just keep doing what we're doing, except 10 times more. 10 times more of this fawning, liberal, fantasy, life in a bubble kind of coverage. Everybody in the room looks around and goes, yeah, that dude is a genius. Let's make him the publisher. That's pretty much how it works in the Philadelphia papers. They're just relentless. They won't change. So the story of Janice Armstrong says, hey, why is everybody making this a racial thing? It's not a racial thing. It's a coincidence that all these black people were beating up all these white people. It didn't have anything to do with race. Can you prove it did, Colin? Can you prove the time before that, time before that, time before that, time before that, way out into infinity? Can you prove any of those things just because it was black people attacking white people? Can you really prove it was racial, Colin? Can't, can you, Colin? Then she staples her fingers in front of her face, looks over her fingers and says, I'm a genius. I know a lot of reporters. I know a lot of columnists. I've won a lot of awards for writing columns. That's how they are. They're unaware. They're comically unaware. They're comically bad at real life. They're comically bad with their own life, which makes it all the funnier that they would sit there and try to give us advice on how to run ours. And so now this ABC News reporter comes in and says, well, black people, better watch out for those cops in Philly because they're going to kill you. The parents go, oh yeah, oh hell yeah. Nobody, not one person pushing back going, hey, does anybody remember any of these cases in Philly where black people were attacking and killing white people? Does anybody remember that? Because that happens all the time. Does anybody remember that? Does anybody remember any one of these three stories?
Today, that ambushed officer told the world what he saw as a gunman put a gun inside his patrol car and pulled the trigger. NBC 10's Deanna Durante was inside the courtroom as Officer Jesse Hartnett came face to face with the suspect. Deanna, how did it go?
Well, the suspect is being held over for trial. Prosecutors say they are not surprised by that decision. Officer Hartnett told the packed courtroom about how he had to duck down and take cover. He only had seconds to react. And then in order to get out of that squad car, he had to use his foot to open the door. Those packing the court in support of Officer Jesse Hartnett says without this video, you'd never know how close he came to losing his life. The street surveillance video has made national news, not just for the on-camera shooting, but the officer's actions, chasing down the suspect despite being badly injured.
And it is a miracle that he's still here, that he was able to exit his patrol vehicle. You heard him say that he had to open the door with his legs.
Officer Hartnett went to court surrounded by police officers. He only spoke on the witness stand, telling the court he knew he was seriously injured. The man who shot him never said a word to him before or after the ambush.
He described that he was bent over from the waist, with his head basically in his lap. He had his left arm shielding his head.
Hartnett was seen here leaving the hospital 2 weeks after that shooting. He told the court he saw the gun and had only seconds to duck down before the shots were fired. He says after chasing Edward Archer, he went back to his patrol car to give himself first aid.
He testified that when he was on the gurney, he assisted medical personnel in removing his gun belt.
Archer didn't testify and didn't say anything in court. His lawyer says it's too early to talk about taking a plea, but hints Archer's mental state may play into his defense.
I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't exploring whether or not that's a viable defense and whether or not he couldn't differentiate right from wrong at the time this happened.
Now, Archer right now is being held without bail. His attorney says that the evidence in this case makes it clear that Archer was the shooter in the crime. But again, you heard him say he is exploring a mental defect defense in the case. That is the very latest. Reporting live outside the Criminal Justice Center, Deanna Durante, NBC 10 News.
Followed developments this morning in the murder of an Overbrook man. 51-year-old James Stallman was shot and killed last week while walking his dog. Police have been questioning several people in his death. NBC 10's Monique Braxton is live for us at police headquarters with an update on the search for the killer. Monique, what can you tell us?
Hey, Vi, solving this high-profile murder case is a top priority of detectives who have spent the last 2 days now working around the clock here on the 3rd floor at police headquarters, as well as near the crime scene. New information we uncovered this morning. This investigation into the death of 51-year-old James Stallman took crime scene techs to this neighborhood at 65th and Girard. Sources also tell us several guns were taken from a home. Also overnight, a handful of people were questioned by detectives. Sources also tell us a teen as young as 14 is among those questioned in connection with Stallman's murder. Now, he was walking his dog 1 week ago when shot in the chest in what police believe was a robbery attempt in Overbrook. Commissioner Ramsey updated us on developments overnight.
We're in a very critical part of the investigation. We are making good progress in the investigation with that very tragic homicide that took place last week.
Stallman's dog, Molly, his flashlight, a wallet, and cell phone were all found at the scene. They don't believe the murderers got away with anything. Right now, there is a $20,000 reward for information leading to the arrest, as well as the killer of this 51-year-old resident of Overbrook. And we should also tell you that we will be following the investigation. Any developments whatsoever in this case, you can count on NBC 10 to have it for you. Live outside police.
Today marks 2 years since a purse snatching turned deadly in Northern Liberties. Amber Long was shot to death, and Philadelphia police are still looking for her killer. Action News reporter Vernon Odom is live where the crime unfolded with the very latest on this case. Vernon.
Police are still looking very hard, Shari. It has been 2 years to the day since the murder here in the 900 block of Northern Liberty Street. North Front Street. The combined reward money is now over $30,000. Police still need tip calls. This is surveillance video of the attack, January 19th, 2014, late at night. 26-year-old architect Amber Long and her mother walking to her car. Two men approach and grab their purses. Stephanie Long, the mother, puts up no resistance, but Amber holds on for a second too long. Her assailant pulls a .22 caliber pistol and shoots her in the stomach.
And one of the males shoots the daughter, and she actually, you see her die in her mother's arms. It just was one of the saddest videos I've seen.
You see the killers flee to what is believed to be a rental car. The video too blurry to make out license numbers on the Chevy Impala. Police have relentlessly hunted the 2 or 3 suspects, including a possible getaway driver.
We have a couple different people through tips that we're looking at. We're doing background on, but right now not strong enough for us to say we have a person of interest.
This neighborhood couple walks past the murder scene every day, and the crime still eats at them. Fred Florian is a retired Philadelphia policeman.
I'm frustrated. We're all frustrated over a pocketbook that had no contents at all.
I feel so bad for the mother and the whole family, and she was so young and so talented, and to be going like that in an instant, it's such a shame.
We know somebody knows who did this. We just need them to call our unit and give us the information.
Brian, Amber Long's alma mater, Philadelphia University, has now established a scholarship in her name. Its endowment now well over $34,000. Live in Northern Liberties, I'm Vernon Odom, Channel 6 Action News.
You know, this isn't Philadelphia, but you know, I mean, if you want to talk about the talk, I'd love to have that reporter sitting right here, right now. What kind of talk should Asian parents give to their children in this country, in Philadelphia? Asian people are victims of relentless black hostility and violence and even murder in Philadelphia. And by the way, there is no Asian on black violence and murder. It's all black on Asian. Every one of these storekeepers is a target. And a lot of you guys probably saw the story just a few weeks ago where a Philadelphia city council member, I think her name is Cindy Bass, she out of nowhere, she comes in and introduces a piece of legislation that says, oh yeah, that plexiglass in all these convenience stores, well, you know, my constituents, they really feel poorly about it because it makes them feel like a criminal, like people don't trust them. It almost makes it seem like every day black people go into that store and harass and steal and threaten and throw and sometimes beat the people and shoot the people who work there. That's what it makes them feel like. You know why? Because that's real life. That's what happens in those corner stores with those little old Asian people running the stores. You ever talk to them? Talk to a ton of them. You know what happens when somebody comes in and, gets a sandwich, runs out, steals, $100 worth of stuff on the shelves. It takes a lot of space to steal $100 worth of stuff from one of those stores. Everything's so small. Everything's, bulky. You call the cops, nothing happens. Cops do not roll on shoplifting calls. Some cities, they put a dollar figure on it, 100, 500, even 1,000. They don't roll. Because any elected official in Wilmington or Philadelphia or Camden or Baltimore or New York or Washington or St. Louis, Kansas City, Big List, Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit, Memphis. This is a long list. Any public official in that city will tell you why. Colin, we're not going to arrest our way out of this mess. And we're not going to criminalize that young person doing all that stealing and criminality. We're not going to criminalize them by putting them in the system. I just saw something from my neighbors are members of one of these little community groups, all the white people, they form these little planning groups. So they had somebody come out the other day and they were explaining about this new program. So basically there's a whole list of crimes. If you commit them, you're not going to get arrested. Shoplifting's one. Instead, you're going to get a ticket. The ticket is not going to go into, quote unquote, the system. That way, we will not criminalize the young people. So remember, catching a black person committing a crime causes that person to have committed that crime. Remember that. Don't forget that. That makes perfect sense to the people running cities like all the places I just mentioned. So what about that? Let's do a case of black on Asian crime down in Houston. A couple of parents, a couple of Asian people. It was the classic story, right? A couple of people came to this country, didn't speak English, learned how to speak English, got a job, saved up a few bucks, opened up a storefront, made a go of it, had kids who loved them. They loved their kids. Two black people rolled in and killed them, and at some point or another, an Hispanic got involved. So that's my question. Is that a black thing since there was an Hispanic person involved? Well, that to me is like asking, is rap a black thing just because Eminem's very popular? Riddle me that, Joker. This black on Asian violence every day is a thing in Philly. It's not just Philly, it's all over the damn place. When they talk about food deserts, what they're talking about is those bad Asian people who have little stores and they're selling things to black people at a higher price than they would get it at, say, the grocery store. Do we really have to explain why the grocery stores are leaving downtown Baltimore, downtown Memphis, and why they've left all these other ghettos? Do you really? Come on now, you don't really need me to tell you that, do you? Do you? Well, if we listen to that clown from ABC News, giving us a little version of the talk, I guess the talk could apply to grocery stores too. The talk would be, and we have to travel very far away to buy our groceries because, white people don't like selling groceries to black people. And they're very mean and nasty to us when they set up grocery stores in our neighborhood. That's why we have to go shop in their neighborhood. So just like the story of the relentless white hostility directed at black people, you could have the same talk on grocery stores. Why aren't there grocery stores? Why doesn't anybody say it's because of this intense level of black criminality that's driving against customers and employees that makes it impossible to do business there. It's not just shoplifting, it's vandalism, it's robbery, it's assault in the parking lot, people coming and going to the store, people waiting around for the employees to leave late at night. If you're the only grocery store for 10 miles around, good Lord, what's it take to drive you out of there? It's like should be a license to print money. Instead, what it is a license to suffer black on white racial harassment every day that sometimes ends in violence and death for the people selling the stuff. That's why the Asians are there. Hey ABC, when can we expect your Asian version of the talk? Why don't we do just a little reminder about what the talk was like when John Derbyshire took a little swipe at it. This is a couple of years ago in 2012. It's called The Talk, non-black version. There's much talk about this. So Derbyshire basically starts off by describing what the talk is and how he's seeing it during all these TV shows. You know, all these mothers are going, yeah, I had to get my son to talk. Yes, John. You know, because the black people, the white people are really nasty. Sean O'Reilly was 16 years old when his mother gave him the talk most black parents give their teenage son, said Denisha of Hackensack, New Jersey. Down in Atlanta, her sons were 12 and 8 when Marilyn Tillman realized it was time for her to have the talk. And on it goes. Everybody's giving the same talk. White people suck. Don't trust them. And if by chance they happen to incur violence at your hands, don't overly worry about it because they deserve it. So Derbyshire, tongue only half planted in cheek, basically gave it all back to him, except with one difference. Derbyshire's talk is rooted in facts. So here's his talk. 1. Among your fellow citizens are 40 million. Here's his talk, father to son. Oh, by the way, I've met Derbyshire, and I've communicated with him a little bit over the years. This is your classic English gentleman. Very soft-spoken, very bright, very funny, very much of a gentleman. So this is what he says to his son, mythical talk with his son. Among your fellow citizens, or 40 million people who identify as black, whom I shall refer to as black, the cumbersome term African American seems to be in decline. Colored and Negro are, I'm paraphrasing, are archaisms. Wow, that's even better than anachronisms. What you must call the N-word is used freely among blacks, but is taboo to non-blacks. American blacks are descended from West African populations with some white and Aboriginal American mixture, which ends up being about 25%. Seems that around 10% of African American population is more than half European in ancestry. I don't think this has anything to do with anything, but everybody talks about Jefferson and his slave/mistress Sally Henning. He had some children with her. Sally Henning, I don't think you really get this in the movies you see about it. She was very light-skinned. So I think Jefferson became ambassador to Paris at one point. At least he was on business to Paris on the behalf of the U.S. government. So he's sitting there having dinner at the U.S. embassy with the ambassador from France, the French ambassador, and Jefferson's slaves are serving dinner. So at one point, the ambassador leans over to Jefferson and he says, "Hey, Mr. Jefferson, why does your slave look exactly like you?" I don't know. I don't know if the cat was supposed to be out of the bag back then or not. Okay, let me see. Let's do some more here. The default principle in everyday encounters is that, whoops, hold on. The default principle in everyday encounters, personal encounters, is that as a fellow citizen with the same rights and obligations as yourself, any individual black person is entitled to the same courtesies you would extend to a non-black person. That is good manners, good citizenships. Sometimes, however, that should be overridden for considerations of personal safety. This column got him fired from the National Review. Great variation. There's lots of black geniuses, black morons, black saints, black psychopaths. Only at the far, far extremes of certain traits are there absences. There are, for example, no black Fields Medal winners. While this is civilizationally inconsequential, it will not likely ever be important to you personally. Most people live and die with ever meeting or wishing to meet a Fields Medal winner. No, I do not know what that is. I mean, so this is the stuff he got fired for. Is that it? Of most important to your personal safety are the very different means for antisocial behavior, which you will see reflected in, for instance, school disciplinary measures, political corruption, and criminal convictions. These differences are magnified by the hostility many blacks feel towards whites. Thus, while black on white behavior is more antisocial in the average than is white on white behavior, average black on white behavior is a degree more antisocial yet. Then he talks about how some black people are ferociously hostile to whites, how other black people are kind of passive in the face of that black on white hostility. So, hey, be careful when you're around lots and lots of black people, because sometimes the fellas are not down with the white people. Stay out of black neighborhoods. Hey, that's what a judge, is National Review going to fire the judge in Chicago who said that? It was that girl the girl who was arrested at the airport, a California girl, arrested at the airport, taken to a Chicago jail, the woman's jail, in the ghetto, in the black neighborhood. After 24 hours, she was acting crazy. They didn't know what to do with her. They kicked her out of jail. No phone, no money, no clothing. All she had on was short shorts and a tank top. Blonde-haired girl. A couple hours later, she's being tossed out of the window of a 7th-story building by a bunch of black people. Parents sued the city of Chicago. This story is easy to find. It's easy to find and don't make the black kids angry. A lot more details to it. Her parents sued the city of Chicago and were awarded $22.5 million. Only after the parents found a professor of sociology at Harvard to talk about routine activity theory, RAT. Routine activity theory says a white person in a black neighborhood can routinely expect to be the victim of some really horrific black violence. Doesn't say the other way around. Black people in a white neighborhood can walk there all day long, but maybe they'll get some dirty looks. They're not going to walk out of there in a pine box. They're not going to be carried out of there in a pine box. Capiche? Do you see the difference, you goofy-ass ABC News reporter? And the story kind of goes on and on to give lots more tips and realistic views of what white people should do when they're in and around black people, to take into account this enormous amount of black on white hostility and violence that we see so many reporters and public officials in denial, deceit, and delusion about. I think it was Milwaukee. One of the crazy. Every city has the one reporter, right? The one clueless reporter. They're all kind of clueless, but the one, that's his job designation. Who does the best job of acting clueless? So there was all these frequent episodes of black mob violence downtown Milwaukee. Over and over and over again, large groups of black people were going here, there, everywhere. They're going to malls. Now, you know what? This might have been Minneapolis. Does it really matter at this point? It's the same story in both cities. It was Minneapolis. And we go into Minneapolis, and he just writes. He goes, we have dozens of examples in the last couple of weeks of large groups of teenagers running around downtown, but we just can't make a connection. We can't see a pattern. Can't see it. Ask any psychologist, ask any teacher, pattern recognition. That's like your first intelligence test, right? An apple, a pear, a gun, which, one of those things is not like the other. If you can't do the pattern recognition, you're not going to win the Darwin. You're going to win the Darwin Award for not really being around on this planet that much longer. But then we have these reporters just absolutely looking in the camera, and these are the same reporters that will, when somebody starts talking about the talk, white people are always messing with black people. Yeah, cops are always killing black people for no reason whatsoever. Scribble, 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 scribble. Oh, this is great. Yeah. What's your name? Tashika? Yeah. Hasn't happened for a long time, right? Oh, yes, Mr. Reporter. It's been happening a very long time. They cannot write that quickly enough. But we have one episode after another of black on white crime and violence in a place like Minneapolis or Milwaukee. They just look at you and go, "Damn, Colin. Guess my mama didn't give me the talk. She did not give me the talk about what happens to white people when they're close to black people in a place like Minneapolis and Milwaukee." The good thing and the bad thing about doing these podcasts, and the good thing and the bad thing about me remembering all these things, as soon as I talk about Milwaukee and Minnesota and Minneapolis, it's like one thing starts tripping after another. So I could just kind of keep telling these stories, like one after another. The first one I'm thinking of is Ray Woodstrand. Black kid moves into a white neighborhood in St. Paul. Boom. Couple months, he ran into a couple of the fellas in the neighborhood. They almost killed him. Permanent brain damage. 2 months later, a white girl moved into the same damn neighborhood. She got killed. Right about the same time, the fellas decided they were going to start rampaging on the public transportation system in St. Paul and in Minneapolis. So you see pictures of hipsters with big big bruised eyes with staples on their heads going, I don't know what happened. I just saw a bunch of teenagers. That's the last thing I remember. And then you get the mayor of Minneapolis and all these clueless liberals who run that town. They say, "Hey, what's up with all that?" And they go, "Oh, no, we're not going to take all this white racism. No, not on our watch. No." But what about all the black on white violence? What about it, Colin? Well, it's not really happening, is it? No, it's happening. We got a lot of stuff in Minneapolis. Thank God for these videos. I mean, we could do more of them, I suppose. But without videos, there's such a bubble of concrete built around so many people. The only way to get through that is not with statistics, is not with hypothetical arguments. It's videos, and this podcasts are really a part of this too. Let's talk about the whole hypothetical thing for a moment. I mean, remember, we have so many facts. Almost never should we have to go in and say, hey, if that had been, instead of a black person beating a white person, if that had been a white person beating a black person, we know it would be different. We don't need to do hypothetical because we know the facts of what happens in those examples. Anyway, this whole thing of white racism messing with so many of our black African Americans, according to this article. I mean, This is like the talk on steroids here. This is an article from Russia Today. And it's about a woman by the name of Muhammada El Muhajir. I'm looking at her picture. Just a regular, nice-looking girl, nice teeth, nice smile. If you look at her, you say, if she showed up in a magazine as a model, I'd believe it. Braids, really thick, ropey braids. Anyway, she's according to RT Today, Russia Today magazine, she left the United States because she felt black people could never win. So let me listen to a little bit of this fairy tale. This comes from a country called Ghana, Accra, Ghana. Dateline, Accra, Ghana. They have come from the big cities of San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. Thousands of them. And many refuse to return. A new wave of African Americans is escaping, get this, is escaping the incessant racism and prejudice in the United States. Lots of black people would not have a problem with that statement. The incessant racism and prejudice thing. Anyway, from Senegal and Ghana to the Gambia, communities are emerging in defiance of conventional wisdom that Africa is a continent everyone is trying to leave. It is estimated that between 3,000 and 5,000 African Americans live in Accra, the Ghanaian capital. They are teachers in small towns in the West or entrepreneurs in the capital, and say that even though living in Ghana is not always easy, they feel free and safe. Take Muhammad al-Muhajir. There, sorry, I should have done this off the air. A digital marketer from New York City. She left her job to move to Accra. She says she moved because despite her education and experience, she was always made to feel like a second-class citizen. Moving was an opportunity to fulfill her potential and avoid being targeted by racial violence. Yeah, she heard the talk. Hey, white people are always attacking black people in America. Don't you know that? Oh, this isn't RT. This is Al Jazeera. Oh, this always comes back to Philadelphia, doesn't it? So here's her story to Al Jazeera. Headline, on her life as a second-class citizen in the United States. I grew up in Philadelphia and then New York. I went to Howard, which is a historically black university. I tell people that Ghana is like Howard in real life. It felt like a microcosm of the world. At university, they tell us the world isn't black, but there are places where this is the real world. Howard prepares you for a world where black people are in charge, which is completely different compared to people who have gone to predominantly white universities. Did anybody know that was like the big mission of Howard, to prepare people for a day when black people are in charge? I've been to the Howard website. We've done stories about white girls that found themselves, white high school girls, found themselves on the Howard campus by accident almost. They were taunted, harassed, threatened, beaten. Yeah, and guess what? Everybody at Howard, so many people at Howard said, what are those white people doing here? They should have known better than to come on a black campus because we're not really down with the white people. So that's the kind of world they're preparing you for at Howard. Did you know that? Did you know that? I didn't. Let's get back to this article from Al Jazeera. I think Al Jazeera, that started in Qatar. Okay. This is, as she talks about, this pioneer talks about her first trip to Africa. The first country I went to was Kenya. I was 15 and traveled with a group of kids. I was one of 2 black kids. I saw early that I could fit in and was not an outsider. Suddenly it switched. I came from America where I was an outsider, but in Africa, I no longer felt like that. I did graduate school in Ghana in 2003 and went back to New York and then moved to Ghana 11 years later. Oh, that supreme Ghana education didn't really open up a lot of doors in New York for you. Back to the article. Sorry. Quote, I have no connection to Ghana. Some people in my family did tests and we found ties to Senegal and the Gambia. But I don't think you can ever figure it out. No matter where you were sold or left the port, Senegal or Ghana, no one can be certain where they came from. Lots of pictures in this article. Then she talks about leaving New York for Accra. Quote, even when you live in a place like New York, as a black person, you are always an outsider. You hear stories about the richest black people like Oprah getting shut out of a store. Oh, by the way, that wasn't true. Or Jay-Z not being allowed to buy an apartment. These things happen. It doesn't matter if you are a celebrity. You are a second-class citizen. That was the biggest issue for me. Period. Parentheses. Or could it be you had a really highly developed case of narcissism and you believed that the world should have been treating you like some unbelievably accomplished African queen when you were just a young person out of college with a worthless degree and no skills? Think about that while we read this article. Back to the article. In America, you're always trying to prove yourself. I don't need to prove myself to anyone else's standards here. I'm a champion. I ran track and went to university, and I like to win. So I refuse to be in a situation where I will never win. And she talks about Ghana. Okay, listen to this quote. This has a great line in it. She's talking about moving to Ghana. There are amenities that I'm used to at home in New York, like party. Notice how she talks about home, New York. Home is the place that when you have to go there, they have to take you in. Robert Frost, back to Al Jazeera. She's used to parties, open bars, and fashion. So when I realized I could do the same thing in Africa as I could back in the U.S., I was sold. I was sold. That's what you call an unfortunate choice of words. Back to the article. There's also a big street art festival here. Wow, there's a street art festival in Ghana. What do they think of next down there? And that was the difference from when I came as a student. I saw things that I love at home here, so I decided now is the time. Okay, the other night I was watching something on PBS. It was Skip Gates. Remember Skip Gates, Professor Henry Gates? Beer Summit, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he's doing this 2,700 part PBS special on African history. So I watched about 30 minutes of it. Most of it involved trade routes. We had a lot of people, driving camels across the desert to trade spices. That was a thing. But then they came to something else. They came to a tub that was built in the year 1600. So they trudge on up, this mountain, through the river, up the woods. They come to this clearing where there was some stones set in the shape of a tub. Maybe the tub was 2 or 3 feet deep. Maybe it had a step or two on it, but it was all overgrown. Nobody cared about it. It was just abandoned. And they were kind of marveling at, wow, look at this tub. They had tubs in Africa. Then they kind of slipped in, the idea that, it must have taken a lot of work to bring the hot water up here from this place and that place to get it warm. And they all looked at themselves like, yeah, that was the pinnacle of civilization on the whole planet, making a tub you had to fill yourself in Africa. What? Nobody's ever heard what a Roman bath is? How they were doing these things hundreds and hundreds of years before the good old Lord Jesus Christ was walking on the planet. First thing they did when the Romans went somewhere was do a Roman bath. Beautiful tiling, really complicated plumbing. I visited a Roman bath at the Hadrian's Wall between Scotland and England once. And I thought, okay, what can there be to this, right? Can't be anything to it. I mean, how hard is it to get hot water into a hot tub? No. To bring the hot water in, and it's going through all these different pipes, and there's some heating going on with certain kind of bricks. Very complicated. But nobody was carrying up water from the stream either and dumping it in a bucket into a tub. And this was thousands of years before these clowns discovered this tub on the side of a hill in Africa. Anyway, how did we stray so far from the talk? We strayed so far from the talk because this is all part of the talk. Part of the talk is, this is who we are as black people. This is what white people stole from us. And so we can go back to Africa and get it without worrying about white people stealing it from us there. Because there, it's like that Eddie Murphy movie. What's it called? Wakanda, I forget what it's called. Same thing with the Black Panther movie. It's like there are skyscrapers and people drinking champagne and beautiful palaces where people dance with lots of feathers. And the Black Panther movie adds some spaceships to it. That's the real Africa. Okay, back to Al Jazeera. Quote, when the Ghanaians find out that I live here, they're usually confused about why I chose to live here as an American. There's definitely certain access and privilege being American here, but it's great to finally cash in on that because it doesn't mean anything in America. There's also plenty of privileged Ghanaians. If you take away race, there's a class system. It's always something, isn't it? It's like, it's always something. I think she made some kind of documentary about this, where she's talking about, in my documentary, I chose 5 people that I've met since I've been here, and every one of them went to a black college in the U.S. It's something that prepares you mentally to realize you are not a second-class citizen. Something like that can help you make a transition to live in Africa. I made Blaxit, must be Brexit, Blaxit, because of this. No, I'm not going to look it up. Blaxit. Because of this wave of African Americans moving to Africa. I've actually seen stories like this with different people on my web pages, my Facebook pages. And the people I've heard is they go down there, hang out in the jungle for like 6 months. You see them in their thatched huts. They're outside. They have sandals on. Everybody's happy. They're drinking something out of a coconut. They're back in the U.S. a few months later. Because they don't like it down there. Okay, so this group has access to America. Hold on. Lost my place. Okay, a wave of African Americans coming to Africa. This trend started to happen around independence of African countries. But the new wave is made up of people who come to places like this. The new group has certain access in America and comes here to have that lifestyle in Africa. Unbeknownst to us, we're living out the vision of Kwame Nkrumah, who's a politician and revolutionary. I'm throwing my fist in the air in case you can't feel it. We're living the vision that Kwame Nkrumah set out for us, of this country being the gateway to Africa for the black diaspora. I don't want people to think Africa is this magic utopia where all your issues will go away. It's just that some of the things you might face in America as a black people, you won't have to suffer with those things here. You might not have electricity, but you will not get killed by the police either. The talk! I want people to understand they have options and alternatives. Most black people in America don't know that these options exist. They think they have to suffer the talk because there's nowhere else to go. But no, there are other places. Wow. That's the talk. That's the complete cinematic version of the talk. That America sucks so much, your only alternative is to go to a place where they don't have food or clean water. Cape Town, South Africa might be the first major city in the world to run out of water. Yeah, that's going to be, how long are they going to play the white card down there? That's going to be a white person's fault. I guarantee it. The talk. And when you go to Africa and you don't feel like working, or you don't show up for work, and you feel like, you're entitled to certain things just because you're black, you're entitled to income, you're entitled to money, you're entitled to some food, you're entitled to a place to live. You're entitled to a level of respect not justified by your accomplishments in life. When you show up with those expectations that you have graduating from Howard University, how do you think that's going to work out in Africa? Good Lord, do we need to drag Ilana Mercer on here? Do we need to drag Kent Brakey on here to talk about what's really happening in Africa and in South Africa in particular? The enormous level of black on white hostility and murder. Let this be the final portion of the talk for white people. Watch what's happening in South Africa. Yeah, it's way worse than even the worst people say it is. The amount of black on white hostility, violence, and murder is off the charts. Why doesn't anybody care? The answer to that question is actually very important to us. A lot of people say, Colin, you ought to go to South Africa. You'll do more stories in South Africa. I would. Some rich guy in South Africa sent me down there. I'd go, okay? I'd go and I would do stories about racial violence, and people and underreporting of it. But in the meantime, know this, and this is from Ilana Mercer and Kent Brakey, two great authors. Ilana's from South Africa. Her book, The Cannibal's Pot, was really a roadmap for us in America about what South Africa means to us now. It's not just a question of looking at another country and saying, oh, those poor African people, we have to help them. No, that's not what her book is about. Her book is a lesson to us. Her book says the world has abandoned South Africa because they believe white people deserve whatever happens to them down there. So there are no exit visas. There is no place for you to go. You're going to stay there and suffer this ridiculous level of hostility and violence that even we cannot imagine here on this continent yet. But the big message here is that the same attitude is starting to come here. When we see this enormous amount of black on white violence, we see an enormous amount of people who say, A, it doesn't exist, B, white people do it too, or C, white people deserve it. White people deserve it. What is the talk about other than those three things? How can you ignore black criminality without saying those three things to your child? Oh, what black people are doing? No, white people and black people do the same things. It's just that cops ignore white people. They let them get away with it. There's too many cops in the ghetto. If we took the cops out of the ghetto, put them up in the rich area, we'd get the same people committing the same crime. But because white people are a bunch of racists, that's not how they roll. That's why black people are in prison. That's the talk. White people do it too. And at the end of the talk, whether that's what you want the talk to be or not, at the end of the talk, the lesson is white people deserve whatever the hell happens to them because they've been so bad to so many people for so long. Nobody's hiding that. Go to all these ridiculous sites on YouTube that are still open that say that openly. Go to CNN. Go to MSNBC. We already went to ABC. Lots and lots of places that are promulgating some version of the talk on us as truth. Lots and lots of places are just convincing us, they're convincing themselves they can do anything, say anything without fear of pushback, fear of contradiction, fear of anything, as long as they do not make the black kids angry.